Well, the holiday season is finally upon us, and you know what that means. You better start building all the Christmas decorations, all the Christmas trees, snowflakes, and even the small little gifts that you're planning on giving to your Aunt Karen, who you only see once a year. And besides a little bit of stress, the only thing you're left with after these projects is a little bit of scrap wood. And today, I'm gonna show you guys what we can build with some of this scrap wood. With only needing about a foot of board, you guys can pump these out real quick, especially if you get like a long 8-foot board. So today, we're gonna be building this fancy phone holder, a very beginner-friendly, easy-to-build project that is great for the holiday season. You know, you can give it to that Aunt Karen that you only see once a year. I plan on building a couple of these today. I'm gonna be putting one in my desk here at home. I'm gonna put one at my desk at work. My wife wants one, and I just gave one to my babysitter. Now again, they don't require a whole lot of material, only about 11 inches of wood. So if you got some scrap wood laying around, you could build out a couple of these, or you can go to the store and buy yourself an 8-foot board, and you can pump out a bunch of them. As usual, the plans for this project are going to be free, and they will be linked in the description below. Again, the plans on my channel are always going to be free because at the end of the day, I feel like people deserve to have nice things without having to pay for them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now to start, again, you're not gonna need a whole lot of material. I got about 16 inches worth of board right here. This is a 1x4. That's what I'm using for this project. Feel free to use whatever kind of thickness or width board you guys would like. It doesn't really matter. The plans are pretty universal for whatever size board you'd like. Now this project's only gonna require 2 tools to build. Some kind of saw to get your pieces all cut out and a brad nailer to put it together. So whether you're using a miter saw, a circular saw, a table saw, it doesn't matter. They all get the job done. It's just all dependent on what you guys have. So to start, the first piece I'm gonna be cutting is the back side of this phone holder. I'll put a little picture up here, again, to show you guys the part that I'm gonna be cutting out. Now with this back side, it does put 2 miters on both sides of the board. One is at 22.5 degrees and the other is at 45 degrees. So before I start measuring out the 5.5 inches that I need for that piece, I'm actually gonna rotate my saw to the 22.5 degree mark, make that first cut, and then once I get that cut done, I'm gonna measure off of that cut 5.5 inches, and then that's where I'm gonna put my 45 degree cut, and then we don't have to worry about rotating our saw anymore for the other few pieces. All right, so now that I got that 22.5 degree cut on there, what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna measure off of this long side 5.5 inches, and that'll give us the mark at which we need to cut the 45 degree angle to. Also, something to note is that these angles are going to be perpendicular with each other. We do not want them parallel. They both have to kind of meet. If you follow them, you know, they have to meet at a point, you know. Yeah, that makes sense.
Science, a lot of science.
So measure off this long side at 5.5 inches, and that's gonna be where we make our cut at 45 degrees. So now I'm gonna rotate my saw to that 45 degree mark. Now, one thing to note real quick before I make this cut is that these parts do not have to be exact length for what the plans show. You guys can shrink them, you can do whatever you want with them, make it smaller, however you decide you wanna handle it, that's fine. So now that I'm set up for 45 degrees, let's go ahead and make this second cut. And just like that, we got our first piece complete. Now to move on to the rest. So the last 2 pieces of this phone holder require 22.5 degree cuts on both sides of each piece. So we're gonna rotate our saw back to that 22.5 degree mark. We're gonna cut off the 45 that we just made because we don't need it anymore. And then we'll get it all measured out and laid out and cut up. All right, so let's go ahead and cut off that 45 degree mark that we had because again, we don't need it anymore. So I'm gonna make the front small piece. Again, I'll put a picture up here so you guys know which one I'm working with, and it's only about 1.5 inches long. Now you guys can adjust this to whatever length you'd like. The bigger the piece is, the more screen space that it's gonna take up when you set your phone in the holder. So I'm just gonna leave it at the 1.5 inches because it's what seemed to work when I built it last time, and that's what I'll go with. So 1.5 inches. So now for the smaller piece, cutting at 22.5 degrees, we want both sides of these cuts to be parallel with each other. We don't want them going perpendicular. And just like that, we got our small 1.5 inch piece. That's gonna be the front of our phone holder. And now for the last piece of this phone holder, we're gonna do the bottom board. With the 22.5 degree already on one side, all we have to do is just measure out 4 inches from that long side, make our cut, and we got all our pieces. For me, I'm gonna cut out this little knot that I have in here, so I'm just gonna cut that off, and then I'll measure off 4 inches and then make the cut. So from this long side, we're gonna measure out 4 inches. And now actually what I'm gonna do is, I didn't say it for the last couple parts, but I'm actually rounding that line over to the edge of the board, because when we make these cuts, with that line being on the, the flat side of the board, it's kind of hard to see, it's really hard to tell. So I'll put that line on the side of the board, put my saw there, and that's where I make my cut. Now with this bottom piece, the last cut is going to be perpendicular. We do not want them parallel, so that way it all goes together nice and easy at the end. And just like that, we got the bottom to our phone holder. So we'll go over to our fancy little table over here and we'll get it put together. Now back at the fancy workbench, what I'm gonna do before I put this thing together as an added bonus is I'm actually gonna sand and stain these parts. I find it much easier to stain things before you put it together, because then you don't have to worry about getting into these tight little cracks to make sure all the stain hits all the parts of the wood. Now again, I did say this would be a 2-tool project. Say that 5 times fast. But if you guys don't have a sander, feel free to skip this step if you need to. Or, I know they make higher quality wood. For me, I didn't get the high quality wood. I just got some, scraps laying around from whatever I was cutting up at the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these sanded down, stained up, and then we'll get it put together. All right, so now that I got all the pieces sanded and ready for staining, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit it with some of this Ipswich Pine 221. It's like a natural color, kind of just brings out the grain in the wood, but maintains that natural color of the wood, because I really like the way pine looks. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and hit it with some stain real quick, and then we'll get it put together. All right, so now that we've given the stain some time to dry, it is time to finally start putting this thing together. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start from the back, put it together, and just do the front. And again, it's a pretty simple, easy, beginner-friendly project. Shouldn't take too long. So starting with my bottom piece and my back piece, I'm just gonna add a little bit of glue to the side, and then we'll stick it together and drive a brad nail through the back side. But remember, when putting this together, that the 45-degree angle goes to the top. And now for this last piece, it's the same exact thing as the backside, just a little bit of glue here and driving some brad nails just like that. Now I did fail to mention that I am using 1¼ inch brad nails to drive these through. Again, that's pretty much the one brad nail size that I use for most of my projects. And just like that, we got ourselves a nice fancy little phone holder. Again, a pretty easy, straightforward, beginner-friendly project. Doesn't require a whole lot of wood. Again, we just use some scrap wood here to put this thing together. And again, if you guys decide that you want to go build a bunch of these, one 8-foot board, we'll get you 7 or 8 of them with no problem. Now feel free to add your own little spin to these things. You don't have to add this front board. Somebody in the comment section of one of the shorts that I uploaded mentioned just using a router to just drill a little bit of a hole to kind of put a little dado in there. And you can do it that way without having to put the little front piece on, and that way it doesn't take up any of the screen. Let your imagination run wild however you guys see fit, but I like this design just the way it is. But that's gonna wrap up this project in this video. If you guys enjoyed this kind of content, you know what to do. Hit the like, share, notification bell, even the subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me. Again, I'm a fairly new channel, and I'm still really new to woodworking, so I'm not a pro by any stretch of the imagination. So if you guys have any comments, tips, or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Just be nice about it. Don't be mean. Everybody has to start somewhere, and I'm just kind of documenting my journey along the way. So with that being said, again, the plans are linked in the description below if you guys are interested in getting them. Again, my plans are always going to be free on this channel, because at the end of the day, I feel like people deserve to have nice things without paying for them. So until the next project, I hope you guys have a good one, and we'll see you in the next one. God bless.